Hello, I'm Barry Redfern, and welcome to the Expat Show, which is a programme in English for expats, of course, in Germany. And, of course, anybody's welcome if they're interested in the English language. Well, also in the studio today is Alicia Banfield.
Hello, hello. And if you're watching in Germany, it's 5 o'clock here. In the UK, it'll be 4 o'clock. That's 4 p.m. But is it really? Summertime here ended officially last night, and everyone, like me, had to turn their clocks back. How do you feel about that? That's one of the topics today. The EU wants to abolish summertime. That is big S, big T. What do you think?
Interesting. Well, also sitting next to, as you probably gathered, is Bernd Mundelow, a tour guide extraordinaire.
Yes, and moin from me from Oldenburg. Maybe you recognize me when you walk through Oldenburg. I always wear a base cap saying, I love Oldenburg.
Do you have an umbrella?
No, I have one, but not with Oldenburg on it.
What I mean is, you know, these tour guides wave an umbrella, don't they?
But then I can't show anything with my hands, so that's why I don't wear an umbrella.
Oh, right, a true professional,
yes.
through and through.
Like wet through and through.
Well, actually, just going back to the summertime, we'll be going live to Britain's smallest, I think it's probably the smallest commercial radio station up in the northwest of Scotland to find out what they think about these proposed time changes of the abolition of summertime. Now, on our last show, Andrew Bossum appeared. He's our man in Bavaria. He appeared in glorious high definition, and I mentioned the shot looked too good to be true. And I said, well, anything's possible with green screen. Well, here he is to prove me wrong. Andrew.
With Halloween fast approaching, I'll be taking a look at some of the things that terrify Germans most. And by the way, you didn't seriously think that was a green screen back there, did you? Really?
I knew it would go wrong. I told you. Anyway, Andrew Bossum will be reporting from Bavaria with his usual tongue-in-cheek look at life. Probably for real, no green screen, but nothing guaranteed. Maybe he doesn't really have a bookcase. Maybe he doesn't have a house or anything. It's all make-believe with green screen.
The wonders of technology.
It certainly is. Anyway, enough of this nonsense. All that is coming up later, and we hope our new time of 5 o'clock is better for everyone than in the morning. One thing I'd like to ask, if you like what we do, then do send us an email. That's the address. That's the email address, studio@expat.show. Write to us, because then if you give us your email address, we can put you on the mailing list, and we can give you a reminder of when our program's coming up and what's going to be in it. So there you are. If you're watching directly on YouTube, you can comment during the live show. We'd love to hear your comments. I've got these up now to my left. I'm looking at the screen, so they're already coming in. Someone saying hello from Berlin. So do keep sending us the messages. Today also there's another big thing happening for Germans. In Hessen, they're voting in the regional elections, and things don't look too good for Mrs. Merkel, do they? Could this be the beginning of the end for her reign, I wonder? Well, joining us on the line now is one man today who's keeping a very close watch on what's happening, is the news chief of the regional newspaper Northwest Zeitung, Dr. Alexander Will. Good afternoon, Dr. Will. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
It's a pleasure. You're distorting a little bit. Maybe your telephone is a bit too near your mouth. I don't know. But you're very loud.
I tried to fix that.
So, I just mentioned Frau Merkel. Do you think she's... you have the finger on the pulse there in the newsroom. Do you think she's on her way out now?
Well, that's a rather difficult question to answer because she proved as a real survivor in politics, and maybe she will survive again. And you really can't predict the outcome of what's going to happen tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. So I'm very curious myself.
But the other parties are making big gains down there, aren't they?
Pardon again? Can you repeat the question, please?
The other parties are making gains at her expense.
Oh yes, they definitely are, and I think what you see is basically that the former conservatives, as I would put it, are losing a grip on their electorate. It's deserting them because basically they stopped being conservative. They took over left-wing agendas, and that was not for their good. The Social Democrats, I mean, that's to me that is quite obvious. They lose to the Greens. The Greens nowadays prove let's put it prove to be the real left-wing party, which has the zeitgeist on its side basically, and that makes them strong.
Now,
talking of the AfD, well. Obviously, they gain from the conservatives.
Now, you made a very interesting point there about her party, because I mean, when you hear about the party, when you live outside Germany, you think, well, it's a conservative party, but now it's, well, in my opinion, as an former Englishman, it's more of a socialist party in some of the policies.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Angela Merkel has more taken up the Social Democratic Party positions than the Christian Democratic position. Another thing I want to add is how high will be the voter turnout be today? I read today on the internet that they will probably have 70 to 75% voter turnout, which will also play a big part.
So what do you think, Dr. Will?
In the afternoon, we were at 35% voter output, so this will probably develop as we approach closing time. Yes, I agree. The CDU, the Christlich-Demokratische Union, is the better Social Democrat Party right now, and I mean you can see that in terms of policies concerning immigration, in terms of the scrapping of the draft, of the military draft, and in many other things. So I agree with that.
What do you think, if I may ask a question, when it comes to the popularity and the image that Angela Merkel has with Germans, what do you think? What are the factors you think that contribute to her longevity, her ability to stick with it, change, adapt, even when it seems like the tide is turning against her?
I think there is a rift in Germany. One part of the population really wants to keep Angela Merkel because she's a symbol of stability, and the other part of the population is just fed up with her. It reminds me of the situation we had with Helmut Kohl.
I was thinking of that
years
too.
ago.
Yeah.
It was basically the same. It was a very strong chancellor who had his merits. Same with Angela Merkel, but people were just fed up. It was the notion of a standstill. It was the notion of we just have enough, and I think this this feeling is very widespread at the moment in Germany.
There's a message that just come in. A comment says, "Yeah, she's been on her way out basically since forever." When was?
That's a good one.
When was the last time she was said to be done? Was it yesterday or the day before? And he says, CDU is the better SPD.
Yeah. She's a survivor, and that's why nobody can tell what's going to happen tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. Yep. That's my conviction.
Okay.
So it looks like probably big gains for the Greens and big gains for the AfD. So we've got two entirely different polarization here, haven't we? With the Greens and the AfD.
That seems to be the trend, actually, not just in German politics, but all over. Somehow history has now shifted the whole world into a position where, for decades before, everyone was trying to come to the middle and be all inclusive and what's not. And maybe, there's a generation that is now fed up of being muted, and they're fed up of being politically correct, and they really want to say what's on their mind, say it loud and proud. So all you needed was these figures to come onto the stage and say it's okay to have the opinions you have. There's no right and wrong. And then once that movement started, it just opened up the doors, and then it is a perfect stage for these polarizing people who come and actually, when they throw in the conversation, it polarizes people even more.
Yeah, but I also think that we have had too many years of the grand coalition, too many years of CDU and SPD together, so people had to go to the...
It's a cozy arrangement,
yeah,
I think.
Yeah. It's nice sometimes to stir up the pot then, maybe.
Dr. Phil?
Well, if you ask me, I think the real turning point was the question of immigration. That was the year of 2015, and that's really, that so many people were upset about what was happening. So many people were upset about Mrs. Merkel acting as she did, and also of the handling of the affair, and also because many people who didn't like what Mrs. Merkel did were simply were put into the Nazi corner, and that was what many people didn't like very much. And
now,
what created a real problem for the CDU.
Now that's an interesting point, because a lot of people just will not vote for the AfD because they've been stigmatized. That party has been stigmatized, hasn't it? Come on, the media. I'm not suggesting your own newspaper is like that, but generally great parts of the German media are very anti-AfD, aren't they?
Yes, they are. But on the other hand, the AfD has a couple of huge problems. Look, they have anti-Semites in the party, and they do not succeed in getting rid of these people. And honestly, as long as this is the case, I think the AfD is not a choice for a lot of people.
But there's no real alternative, is there, in Germany? Because what choice is there now?
What choice is there? That's the tough question. I don't have an answer to that. You can. It's like always. You can choose to accept it and to say, well, okay, it's the lesser evil, I vote for the AfD, or you can say, well, I don't do that because of this and that, and I go for the liberals, for instance, for the Free Democrats.
But do you think there's a place for a new party that takes some of the AfD policies and says, we don't want all these people flooding into Germany, but at the same time has a friendly face?
Yeah, I definitely think so. This would be a step into European normality, if I can put it that way. It would mean that we have a true conservative party again, which there is in every European country. I doubt that the AfD is this party right now.
I agree with you. The AfD has too many people there, as you said, there on the right-wing side, and that scares some people of voting for the AfD. I agree with you. Yeah.
Another comment that's coming in now. It's this interesting observation. Since about 2015, support for the Greens has kept pace with support for the AfD, according to the results of the regular Sonntagsfrage. And another one says, why should it be appealing to stir the pot as long as what's cooking is perfectly fine? Interesting.
That's an interesting comment.
In all honesty, if you want to stir the pot, vote for Die Partei. But neo-Nazis are never a solution ever.
But it's in a way it's human nature. Being too comfortable, it does, as Dr. Will said, give you this sense of stagnation. You want to do something. You want to. There's this idea that there is something else out there that you're missing, and unfortunately, in this day and age of the internet and what's not, there are plenty of platforms for people who do want to stir the pot. The counterbalance to that is being well informed and shying away from all this fake news, understanding what the real issues are, so you vote with common sense as opposed to with emotional hysteria.
Okay, well, let's leave the parties on one side now and look at some of the things Angela Merkel has done. She has brought in a lot of controls, hasn't she? I mean, what we can and cannot do. Dr. Will, what about censorship? Do you think there's getting more and more control over what we can read or hear about in the media?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say the freedom of press in Germany is infringed. It's still there. It's still very vibrant.
Yeah, but
especially in the regional media, a number of online media outlets made the scene even more colorful. However, there are certain scissors in the heads of many journalists, I'd say. If we have the impression of a media which is committed to a certain political alignment, I think this is due to the ruling convictions in the media, within the media community. There has been one survey which asked for party affiliation of journalists, and the result is rather clear. Whereas 36% stated that they would not harbor any sympathies for a particular political party. More than half actually said that they had sympathies for the Greens, for the Social Democrats, and for the communists. And this, I think this says something.
Let's look at the television channels, because in Germany there are big committees over the top of the governing bodies, over the top of such as ZDF, ARD. How many are on these committees? It's a lot, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's the public TV and radio system in Germany, in my opinion, is rather ridiculous. I mean, look, the overall yearly budget is 7.98 billion euros. This is the most costly system worldwide, and in addition, you have advertising earnings. Revenue. I think BBC has something like 4 billion euros and no advertising. And of course, all these broadcasting committees are dominated by political parties. One example: ZDF, second TV channel, second German TV channel. The president of the administrative council is the prime minister of the federal state of Rhineland-Pfalz, Malu Dreyer, and her first deputy is an ex-secretary of state from the CDU. and most of the other members have party affiliation too. So nobody can say that there is no political control on the public media system.
Let's look at another form of control, because Merkel was seen whispering in Mark Zuckerberg's ear. What was it, about 18 months ago, asking him what he was going to do about comments on Facebook about the immigrants, etc. And I think now there's a lot greater control on such as Facebook, especially in Germany. Is that right? That social media is really taking a hit now. There's a lack of freedom of speech.
Yeah, I mean that's what many people indeed feel. I'm not quite sure if it's really that way, because I personally experience a very vibrant discussion actually, and even me as an outspoken critic of German immigration politics, I've had no problems whatsoever. So what happens? What indeed happens is that Facebook or Twitter very often mishit, that they hit people, that they block people, which didn't actually do anything wrong. So there are many mistakes, and that creates outrage.
But there's this kind of knee-jerk reaction within Facebook and other social media sites that it's automated censorship. They just feel that they cannot take the risk, so they put a blanket kind of censorship in there. Same with
there's overblocking, definitely. There's definitely something like overblocking, and that makes people furious. But I think this is part of a much wider problem. On the one hand, you have freedom of speech, freedom of expression. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, there was introduced a thing like hate speech.
Yes.
Well, you either have freedom of speech or you have it not. You cannot say I'm pro physics, but I'm against gravity.
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and hate speech is simply an invention with the aim to narrow public debate and to curb public debate. And you don't need this concept at all, since, for instance, for calls for murder, they are prohibited by law anyway. So you can sue somebody. So you don't need this concept to keep a certain discussion clean and clear.
Alicia.
Yeah, I just want to. So, do you think any line should, or do you think there is a line that should be drawn at some point, saying, okay, this is the limit beyond which you're not allowed to go?
Yes.
Because at one extreme there is censorship. But then at the other extreme, there are these provocateurs who use it as a platform to preach, hate and let's go out there and hurt other people. So do you think there is a line that could and should be drawn that's not so extreme?
Oh, yes. I do think so, mm-hmm. And this line is very clear. Mm-hmm. It's when it gets into conflict with the law, and this is, for instance, calling to murder someone, mm-hmm. or demanding a new Holocaust. Of course, there is a line, and there should be a line. There must be a line. This line is clearly drawn already by law.
Yeah. But what about criticism of Islam? Because there is a group in England that's right now discussing. Well, they're suggesting that people who are highly critical of Islam should be given prison sentences of up to 6 years. Now, whether this group has any power or not, or whether anything would happen, I don't know. But certainly, it's being discussed. What's your feeling about that? Because you're actually an expert in Islamic studies, aren't you?
Yes, I did Islamic and Middle Eastern studies, and took a degree from the School of Oriental and African Studies in London. Actually, yes, I absolutely object to that, of course, because what you do is you curb research, and you curb science when you do that. not only the freedom of expression, but also you curb research. And I think you should not do that. You can't make laws which exempt certain religions from criticism or from research. This is simply impossible.
Okay, let's just turn our attention now, finally, to one last detail about state control. Do you think we're being micromanaged these days? I mean, is Germany turning into a nanny state? You know, what we can and can't do?
Oh yeah, there are definitely certain symptoms which point into that direction. I mean, think about things like food, drink, smoking. On all of these fields, you have infringement of the private sphere of life, and it is always justified by an obscure notion of the good as such. However, I mean, you have to ask the question: who determines what that is? And in Germany, it's the state. The example we had a couple of weeks ago was curbing the sugar content in certain products. However, you don't have this. This development in Germany only. You also have it in England. You also have it in the USA.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
this is just probably it's a development which concerns the West as a whole.
You know, a while back, I interviewed someone from the agricultural ministry in Hanover, because we're not allowed to use vinegar now to kill weeds. We're not allowed to use salt either. And I found this amazing. And I discovered that someone in our region actually was caught using some vinegar to kill weeds, and he was prosecuted. He had to pay a fine. Now, the thing is, the authorities said, here's a fine, you have to pay it. But then it went to court, and the court said, no, you don't have to pay, because it seemed to be two conflicting authorities.
Yeah, probably. That's. I mean, politics. German politics. They tend to tell people what is good for them, and if you do not comply with certain expectations concerning your lifestyle, you'll become a pariah in certain segments of society today. And and this is especially true for eating meat, for smoking, or for drinking alcohol.
Right. Well, Dr. Will, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for giving up so much of your time, and let you get back to the newsroom now for the election.
Okay, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be on your show.
Great. Thank you very much indeed.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well, coming up later, we go live to Britain's smallest radio station. Probably not small in terms of the area it covers, but arguably certainly one of the smallest when it comes to the building it's in. We'll be talking to the boss of 2 Locks Radio in the far northwest of Scotland. But right now we're going in the other direction. That's down to Bavaria and Andrew Bossum. And over to you, Andrew.
The Halloween season is almost upon us, and although it is a fairly recent introduction to the German cultural landscape, it has become something of a thing. Which means that some years we do get small children dressed as Spider-Man or Imperial Stormtroopers begging for chocolate. Except for that one year when we got 3 17-year-old girls in eyeliner saying, trick or treat. Spooks, witches and monsters are all the stuff of traditional German folk tales. One of my personal favourites is the story of the Mouse Tower of Bingen. But locally to me there's also the tale of how the Devil's Mill got its name, a tale which was considerably improved about 50 years ago by a murder that actually took place there. This is of course fantasy, a bit of harmless fun, cautionary tales for the children and imaginative folklore for the rest of us. But what are Germans really afraid of? Forget poltergeists, they don't really exist. Oh no, there are real things out there that should scare you half to death if you have any sense. You do not know the true meaning of horror until you have encountered the current of air. This terrifying monster creeps in under doors and through slightly open windows. It turns your skin white, your neck stiff, and your bones sore. And then it leaves you to die of pneumonia. You must plug every gap, close every vent, and wear thermal underwear, even in the height of summer. Only then can you hope to escape the terror of the slight chill. But even this is trivial compared with the fear of unexpected photography. It is a dangerous world out there. Anywhere you go, somebody could be pointing a camera at you. But don't get the wrong idea. This is not some silly superstition about the camera stealing the soul. No, it's worse than that. Far, far worse. You will be robbed of your privacy. The moment your slightly blurry face appears in the bottom right-hand corner of a picture of some schloss somewhere, you will fall prey to identity thieves, cyber stalkers, and secret agents. Soon your house will be surrounded by other people. Your private life will be a dim and distant memory. Complete strangers will know your every move and hound you to the grave. But there is one more thing that terrifies Germans beyond all imagining. It is the haunting, creeping fear of inaccuracy. Nobody is immune to this. If you foolishly state that the sky is blue, the contagion has already started. It can only be stopped by somebody pointing out that
no, it's not really blue, it just looks blue because the dust in the atmosphere scatters blue light more than it does any other wavelength.
if misinformation is allowed to spread, it will seep into every aspect of society, poisoning the human race and ultimately bringing about the destruction of civilization itself. If you are exposed to inaccurate information, you must immediately ward off the evil with the magic incantation, "You are wrong." And you must do so with absolute conviction, otherwise you are lost. And so these are the things that most scare Germans. Nobody is afraid of ghosts because ghosts don't exist. Or do they?
I can relate to all three of those, but especially where we live, the privacy one, because we actually had in our neighborhood 2-3 neighbors comment to us about the privacy issue, because we didn't immediately, as soon as we moved in, enclose our porch, and the comments were well, translated into English, "Oh, I couldn't do that, it's so open." Oh, and I'm there thinking, we have curtains, you know. We actually have double curtains. We have a share, and then we have a heavy curtain. And we close...
Oh, it's a posh house then.
No, but we close them for that very reason. But we come from the Caribbean, where you want the sunlight to come in, and then at night, because you've got more light inside the house than outside the house, then you want to be able to close the heavy curtains. So our curtain system it's a bit of a Caribbean eyes. So we've got this. But during the day, when there's more light outside, we open the curtains, so there's just the glass. But we had neighbors who gave us these extensive lectures on privacy and what's not. And all I could think of is, well, you're not in my bedroom and you're not in the bathroom with me. So I really don't care if you see my dining chair in front of the living room door. The door itself isn't open, but it's glass. But yes, they were quite shocked. But they don't complain in the summer when we have our summer party, and then they understand why our terrace is open, because it makes for a great setting for a party. So there you go.
I know. I've been to one or two of these.
Yeah, we get loud. And
I dropped my mouse.
And the other, which hits on another thing. Then the punctuality with Germans. That's another thing that they fear, Andrew. The exact hour, because according to tradition or law, whatever, all noise and party should come to an end 10:30. But we get around that when we have our summer party. We just invite the people who would complain.
Or you just inform the neighbors.
Yeah, exactly, the neighbors. We invite them if they're at the party. They can't
And what
complain.
about Halloween?
Oh, yeah. I must admit, I'm not a Halloween person. Are you a Halloween person, Bert?
No, because we just imported it from the States. There was no Halloween 20 years ago, and all of a sudden it's sort of a German quote unquote custom, which it isn't really.
No, it's not.
But it's a kind of a Celtic thing as well, isn't it?
Of course, from Ireland.
Yeah,
Ireland and parts of Scotland.
Yeah.
I think so. I think Halloween is a Celtic tradition. We'll soon find out, because joining us on the line now is the boss of one of Britain's most northerly commercial radio stations, Alex Gray of Two Locks Radio, which is based in Gairloch. Hello, Alex.
Hello there, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. We don't have...
thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. We don't actually have a still picture of you, Alex, but you very kindly sent us some video earlier on, which we'll play in a moment. Oh, we're playing it now. Right.
You're listening to Two Lochs
We're always
Radio,
keen to get in.
Broadcasting to the Gairloch and Loch Hugh areas on 106 and 106.6 FM.
We'll have a listen to this.
One of the events that's happened over the years that really sticks in the mind the most, because it was the most traumatic, we had a hurricane here in January 2005, which did an awful lot of damage. The masts which we erected survived the hurricane, to our amazement. We were very, very impressed and pleased to see that. But unfortunately, the wee shed we'd built beside it to house all the equipment didn't. That was away and gone.
Welcome to Two Locks Radio, listeners across the shores of Westeros. And every weekday we all tune in to hear the weather news and what we can do today. 106 and 106.6 FM are the frequencies to find. We're all friends together.
Listened for the first few weeks, and there were only 4 presenters, and they were running around all the shows themselves and doing everything. And I thought, well, maybe I could go up and read the weather or read the news, just on a very low-key basis and help out. Next thing I know, I've got a 2-hour show, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing that. And if you don't say no and run away quickly enough, you get lumbered for all sorts of things. But it's great fun. So summer's here, and it's time for dancing, not in the streets, but in Poolew Hall, every Wednesday evening.
But in Torrington Village Hall, there's a throughback at noon today, between noon and 2 p.m. That sounds like a good place to be.
The more line of sight you have from the transmitters, the better. So I spent a lot of time with maps and contours and lines drawn on them to work out where we could do it and where we could afford to do it. And the answer came down to one particular hill on the south side of Loch Gairloch, where we could not only cover all the communities around the Gairloch, but that could be seen from the radio studio, so we could send the signal to it, and it could see a second mast that was already in place above Loch Hugh, which would cover all the communities around there.
Se un program a ha corder I moran, program se vadin et echtri in a tarna skide, e had a vi son unje vor.
An sa program seo chun sif Kitty nich kennig as na hopanen a cumal oie a cora gri Roddy mach kennig agus riúm sa alles nich kennig mulochtichen an den Porstikel.
Schön sind sie, die schottischen Highlands, aber manchmal auch ganz schön abgelegen. Um die Dörfer zusammen und die Menschen bei Laune zu halten, haben sich einige Bewohner eines alten Mediums erinnert. Hier sendet Two Logs Radio, das Zwei-Seen-Radio. Der Rundgang dauert nicht lang, das Studio ist so übersichtlich wie das Programm.
There's a Pilates class at Terry with the annex of Gairloch Community Hall. This class is for those who already have some Pilates experience. There's a beginner's class on Wednesday evening.
Termine, Sprechstundenzeiten bei Ärzten, ein bisschen Klatsch und Tratsch, jeden Tag ein paar Stunden für gut 2.500 Bewohner Gairlochs.
Just local information about what's on and what the weather's like, and I quite like the music as well.
I think it's become vital to the community in the last 4 or 5 years.
David Carruthers betreibt den einzigen Laden in Gairloch. Er schaltet Werbung beim örtlichen Radio und unterstützt es.
It's 4 sisters.
Eine Lizenz erwerben, wie große Stadt heute, verbindet es Gairloch mit der Welt und die Welt mit Gairloch.
There we are. It's a snapshot of Two Logs Radio, which is in Gairloch in the far northwest of Scotland. And on the line now is the boss, is Alex Gray of Two Logs Radio. Alex, we saw pictures of you there, I think, in the video.
Yep.
I don't know if you were watching that or not, but
I saw that. Yeah.
You sent us those clips, and so there was one clip that was actually in Gaelic, wasn't it, from the BBC's Alba channel? So they visited you, and there was a clip at the end which was in German. So German TV's visited you.
ZDF came over. I can't remember exactly what prompted them to do it, but they had they have a magazine program. I can't remember its title, but it's basically a magazine program about the UK that they were doing at intervals, and they were looking around for things to feature and decided to venture further north than London for once.
Now, how big an area is this that you cover?
Well, as you mentioned earlier, geographically it's quite large. It would, for example, encompass pretty much Glasgow and Edinburgh if you were to lay it in the central belt of Scotland, or maybe be the size of somewhere such as Birmingham or Manchester. But in terms of population, it's about the same as 1 or 2 suburban streets in one of those cities.
I understand it. Two Logs Radio has a very interesting background, how it all got started.
Well, it's community-driven. Someone who is now actually a local shopkeeper had worked for another local radio station in Scotland when it was launched as its publicity manager, and he moved to this area to relax a little, I think, and had the bright idea of having a radio station. Wouldn't it be a good idea to have a radio station here? And the community got together. They worked on the idea for about 10 years, but not a lot happened. And then, just by chance, 2 or 3 of us interested in radio had moved into the area in the late 1990s and got together and said, let's try and make a real go of this. At that time, we didn't have what we have now in the UK, which is official community radio and community radio licenses. We had to apply for a full commercial license at that time, which was quite a rigmarole. It's a very involved process and geared up to stations that are expecting turnovers in the millions.
So you're actually a commercial station, and you have to...
Yes, we have a full commercial license, just the same as one of the big stations, Capital or whoever.
And you have to play by the same rules as the big boys.
We do, and we also have to play by some of the same costs, unfortunately. A lot of the costs of things such as copyright licenses and the like don't scale down. They do have some lower tiers for smaller stations, but as I said, to them a small station is one with a turnover of less than £1 million, and we are at something like a 30th of that.
Yeah. So it doesn't sound like it's relaxing fun anymore. It's a job. It's a big undertaking.
It is a bit of a I hesitate to use the word millstone, but it's certainly a.
How long has it been running now?
It's a commitment. 15 years this November. We're just coming up to our 15th anniversary.
Oh, anything big planned for your 15th?
Not big. We'll have. Being a membership operation and community-owned, run as a not-for-profit company. We have an AGM each year, and at the AGM we'll have a big quiz night, and this year's will just be a bit bigger and more special than past ones. We have done in past years when it was even more of a surprise that we were still there. We've had a few big local events, and we've done things such as issuing a CD of some of the favourite traditional music of the area for our 5th birthday, which is still available if you'd like. Still available online.
Ooh.
Actually, I was listening to the jingle when it was playing, and I was thinking, right, that hangs it, Barry. We need a jingle for our show, something nice and lively.
We're working
and
on
fun.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not hugely big on jingles. We have our station idents, as you heard there, but we're not the sort of kind of station that has lots of latest Zap Pow jingles between things.
Have you got a pipes and drums band there?
Sorry?
Have you got a pipes and drums band there? Like
bagpipes.
Yes, we have. In fact, we've a couple of years back, there was no pipe band in our immediate area. There was one to the north in Ullapool, but there was none here. One formed a few years back, basically for young people, for school-aged and upwards, and that's now become well established, and they are doing very well. And we have partnered with them. We do a joint fundraising lottery locally because local fundraising is part of the income we have to make, and we have a local lottery which we run jointly and split the proceeds with the local pipe band.
Alex, when we saw the video running, there were pictures of a very high transmission mast, and there was someone climbing up it. Was that you?
That was my daughter. At the time, she would have been about 15, 16. We built that ourselves. We did everything, soup to nuts, the whole operation, ground up. We even had to get the trench dug up the hill and lay the power cable up the hill for the transmitter. And we built that mast.
So it was a real labor of love. Sound like you've slogged through a lot of obstacles, like you said. People are fascinated that you're still going. So now you're here, 15 years. You're bigger and more stable and grounded than you expected to be. Anything planned for the future?
No great plans. We do have some. We have authorization for a couple more relay transmitters to increase our geographical coverage.
Yes, because you've got all these mountains in the way, haven't you?
That's the problem. If we were in nice flatlands, one big mast would do it. But here, there's two problems. One, we have the coastal, the mountains running out to the coast, the same sort of thing as fjords in Norway. The whole coastline is a series of deep indentations. And on top of that, the population will go and live right round the little deep fringes of that. Everybody lives around the coast. Nobody lives on the high ground.
Is your radio station also situated on the coast?
It is. It's in fact, if the weather's rough, it does come in through the door a wee bit.
And you get that. So you get that dreaded draft that Andrew mentioned.
Last week, the front of the radio station was being slapped by the sea. Just as the wind catches a wave top on a high tide, it can blow across the boat.
So you open the front door, and there's the sea.
Yes, absolutely.
So you run the radio station then in galoshes and raincoats, sitting at the microphone.
I don't know if you. I think it was in that little clip there. Somebody came to interview me from a newspaper and asked if I would step outside to take a photo. And I, having been caught this way before, I said, "You're not going to make me look silly in this photo, are you?" Said, no, but would you mind wearing headphones and taking off your shoes?
Yes.
At which point he had me standing with my trousers rolled up in the sea to take this photo.
Oh, it sounds like a lovely setting. If I worked there, I'd probably spend all my time looking out at the water and not listening to the radio.
It's a very relaxed area. I was hearing what you were saying earlier about the curtains and privacy and so on. People here don't use curtains.
Well, there you go.
And in winter, bear in mind, it's pitch dark at 4:30 in the afternoon. We only have about 7 hours of daylight, proper daylight in the winter.
Yeah, if you're that far north, what is so 7 hours of daylight is the shortest amount in summer.
In the midwinter we get broad daylight from about 9 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Okay.
Now this is interesting, Alex, because there's all this talk about abolishing summertime. In fact, the European Union, I think, wants to abolish summertime, and it might happen. So how do Scots in the north of Scotland feel about those plans?
Well, I'm pretty sure that in some of the more urban areas, there's quite a lot of opposition to it, particularly the idea of kids walking to school in the dark and so on. Here, I'm not so sure that people would be quite so concerned, because our children already have to walk to school in the dark in the winter. So, with one darkness is the same as another darkness, even if it's an hour later. The school, like the radio station, the school has a large catchment area. The school's catchment area is, 80 kilometres long and down the coast, basically. Some children have to set off for school at 7 in the morning. They have a taxi ride to a bus, to another bus, to the school. And they don't see their homes in daylight from one weekend to the next in winter. That wouldn't change if it were an hour earlier.
Your radio station's got some admirers. A comment has just come in saying, "Okay, now I want to build a radio station."
Yes, I see that. There you go. Well, it's building the radio. That's just a wee bit you see on the surface. Of course, there's all the regulations, the rules, the day in, day out slog, all the bills to pay, and so on.
You've got a. Am I right in saying?
Be careful if you wish for a radio station. You might get what you wish.
You might get what you wish for. It's like a boat.
You're an all-rounder, aren't you? Because you've worked on the transmitter, you've built the studio with others, and done quite a lot.
Yeah, station manager in most radio stations might conjure up the picture of someone sitting behind a desk pushing paper around, but for me, it's the engineer, everything from mopping out the cloakroom to the engineering on the mast.
So when you've got, you say a small radio station, if you calculated up all the people that you need to really keep this quote unquote small operation going, how many would you say?
We have probably 4 or 5 people who are insanely committed to it. And then maybe another 20 volunteers who will do a couple of hours each week on a program. Those 20 aren't the same throughout the time. There's some come, some go, and a constant stress really is finding new people to replace the natural wastage as people move out of the area or pass on to other interests or whatever.
Do you run 24 hours a day?
You're probably looking at between 20 and 30 active people at any one time.
Yeah. I was wondering too, how many hours a day do you broadcast?
Well, we have a license commitment that says we must broadcast locally based programs for 35 hours a week.
Okay.
We actually originate around 68 hours a week, but that's not all from within our studio. We do live programs each morning and evening, the breakfast program from 7:30 till 9, and what we call a drive time program, although it's not a big commuter area, from 5 until 7 in the evening. So those are our core live programs, and they're full of the sorts of things you might expect of a local radio station: the travel, the weather, the news, general chit-chat, what's on in the local area. And then in the evening from 7 until 11 or midnight, depending on the day of the week, we still have local programs, but they are pre-recorded so that people can carry on with their daily lives. They'll come in during the day and recorded those programs, and we'll have edited them and put them together and line everything up to play out unattended in the evening. But they are still local programs or ones made for the local area. We do have quite a few contributors who are in other parts of the country and in other parts of the world.
Oh, wow. Excellent.
In fact, we have somebody in Germany who's lining up to do a series at the moment. But until now, we have a couple in Cape Breton in Canada who do one of our Gaelic programs each week. We have somebody in Florida who does old-time traditional country and blues music program. We have somebody in Glasgow. We have somebody in Edinburgh.
It's quite an international flavour.
Yeah, the chap in Edinburgh he's a mild-mannered Edinburgh property solicitor by day and a raving rock DJ at night.
Good for him.
He does it live from his home studio each Saturday night. So we have a wide range of things, including
Sounds brilliant.
So some people produce programs specifically for syndication on a select group of small radio stations, maybe 3 stations, maybe 7 stations, and they produce these programs for the sheer love of it. But some are retired professional radio presenters.
I know somebody
others that
too.
are just doing it as a hobby. Some work in hospital radio, all sorts of things.
That's brilliant.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Right at the very beginning, we were talking about Halloween and it being possibly Celtic culture. So is it big in your area?
Well, I think there's a little bit of controversy about Halloween, but I know there's one certainly widely accepted theory is that it comes from the Celtic Sabin festival, which is at this time of year, and like quite a few now Christian festivals or other traditions have been adopted into the dominant culture. In this area, I would say less than in more urban parts of Scotland. We certainly don't get so much of the what you might call trick or treat. In Scotland, it's called guising, and it's certainly very traditional in the cities. In the Highlands, it doesn't. It's not. I guess partly it's because it's pitch black. The houses
it's
are
the
some
terrain,
apart, and the weather is usually foul.
Yeah.
So the appeal of going door to door in the hope of a handful of sweets is maybe not quite so high as it would be if you're going down a street of door after door after door.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
And what about? Oh, sorry, Alicia.
No, I was about to say. Well, I'm going to offend a segment of the listening population by saying I think it's a bunch of rubbish. Halloween. Sorry.
Fine, I'm not offended. I mean, certainly one thing I've not seen here is the except when my own son did it some years ago. But generally, the carved out pumpkin in the window,
the candle, the light.
Of course, in Scotland, it wasn't traditionally a pumpkin. It's a neep or a turnip.
Okay.
That's what they would use for making the Halloween face. Carved out.
Now the language.
Time. The pumpkin is a late introduction from
probably
the USA,
Americanized.
Well, talking about Celtic culture, apart from English, is Gaelic spoken widely?
Yes. Can I just explain that? Gaelic is how it's pronounced in Scotland for Scottish Gaelic, and Gaelic is Irish.
Right. Thank you for putting me right on that. Right.
No problem. Yes, I mean, we have a couple of Gaelic programs each week, one locally produced and one, as I mentioned, produced in Cape Breton, where there are also a lot of Gaelic speakers and a very strong Celtic and Gaelic tradition. Okay. It fell into sort of a bit of a decline in the late 60s, 70s, 80s, when parents, I think, felt that for their children to get ahead, they should be speaking English and they needed to learn English. And it looked like it was really going into something of a decline, but in the last 20 years, it's experienced a tremendous revival.
Like in Wales,
that, ironically, is often in the less traditional Gaelic-speaking areas, simply because of numbers and economics. Towns such as Glasgow have wholly Gaelic schools.
I was about to ask if it's taught in schools.
In the Highlands, a lot of schools will have either a Gaelic stream where pupils can go through doing Gaelic in a mixed school. There are a couple of purely Gaelic schools, or purely depending on the availability of teachers, they may do certain subjects. For example, our local secondary school, the high school, offered geography in Gaelic. That was purely because the geography teacher was also a Gaelic speaker. When you have schools, our high school, when you have pupil numbers between 100 and 200, there's often only one teacher for each subject, and the practicality of having two streams in two different teaching languages is very difficult indeed. Gaelic is taught as a language, just as French or German might be for everyone. That's I think in most of the high schools in the Highlands, the first 2 years, everybody would do Gaelic and French or German. But in terms of using the language as the medium of teaching, then it's less common, but is available in various schools.
Maybe on the Hebrides, huh?
Well, Alex,
back in the 60s, a child in this area going into primary school at the age of 6 would not have spoken English at home. They would have to learn and switch languages when they got to school.
Well, Alex, I'm afraid I don't speak Gaelic, but if I did, I would be saying we've run out of time. And thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Very interesting.
And wish you all the best. Wish Two Locks Radio and everybody who work for it all the best. And thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much for speaking to me. I guess then I should say goodbye to you in Gaelic, should I?
Yes, please. Yes.
I mean, and indeed, our Tesco's in Inverness will have this up on a big sign where you might normally say thank you and goodbye. They will say mash in leave.
Mash and leave.
Okay.
Oh,
mash and leave, Alex.
Great.
Mash in live. I'll probably get pulled over for my pronunciation.
Alex.
Okay, then. Thank you very much.
Thank
Nice
you
to
very
speak to
much
you.
indeed. Good. Well, that was Alex Gray of Two Locks Radio, based in Gairloch and covering quite a wide area, sometimes called the smallest station in Great Britain, but as you can see, it's not really that small. Well, that's just about it for this month. Just a reminder that if you like our shows, we can send you a reminder if you'd like to join our mailing list, and the address, well, that's our website. If you'd like to go to the website, you can find out more about us, and that is the email address, studio@expat.show. studio@expat.show. It really would be great if you would drop us a line with your email, and we can put you on our mailing list. It will help us enormously if we can start building up a mailing list. So, as I said, that's just about it for today. In our team today were Alicia Banfield, Bent Munderloh, Andrew Bossum, and Bastian Spiller. So, from me, Barry Redfern, it's goodbye until next month.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.